Good morning again. My name is Mary Fauver Holmes, and as a member of the Authors Selection Committee, I'm delighted to welcome and introduce Kathy Wang as she shares her third novel with us. The Satisfaction Cafe opens with anything but a sense of satisfaction. The main character, Joan, is a graduate student at Stanford studying away from her home and family in Taiwan. Her arranged marriage ends almost as quickly as it began, with Joan stabbing her lecherous husband. He lives, but Joan is a starving student living frugally and with little security. Over the years, she marries an older, wealthy man, is stepmother to his many children, has children with him, and swims in the elite pools of Palo Alto society. Yet, she feels almost no satisfaction. The idea of establishing a satisfaction cafe develops over time as Joan strives to provide a setting where patrons can engage in meaningful and rewarding conversations while enjoying a little pastry and a hot beverage. The story spans 50 years of Joan's life and deals with themes of loss, loneliness, feeling othered, parenting and step-parenting, aging, and the search for meaning and purpose. Kathy Wang has crafted a charming tale relevant to readers of almost any age. She says she does her writing first thing in the morning at her kitchen table, which has the advantage of being far in her house, far away from the Wi-Fi, therefore offering a poor signal so she cannot distract herself by scrolling on social media. Then she goes off to a full day of work in the tech world. She grew up in the Bay Area and did her undergraduate work at UC Berkeley and received her MBA from Harvard Business School. She and her husband live in Los Altos with their 2 school-aged children. The Satisfaction Cafe has been a national bestseller, an Indie Next, and a Library Reads selection. There is so much to ponder and discuss in this book that I expect many of you will choose it as your next book club selection. Please join me in welcoming Kathy Wang.
Thank you, Mary. I don't know actually how you know about the kitchen table, so I'm very impressed by that detail. So first off, thank you so much to festival organizers for the opportunity to be here today at this incredible event. It is just so humbling. It's such a pleasure to be here amongst readers and also authors that I so admire. I loved hearing the story of both Layla and Amity. It really just bowled me over how they were both such early bloomers and so precocious, and it made me a little nervous as my story is more about being a highly delayed bloomer and not precocious. So the talk I'm going to give today is one that I don't usually give. I actually did it on impulse the first time after a conversation with the author Ann Patchett at my first book event, which was at Parnassus Books, which is owned by Anne. And at the end of it, she said that I should give this speech every time, but I still chicken out most of the time because it is a speech about failure. And sometimes you really have to be in a warm and welcoming room, like this one, to do it. But I am going to share that talk with you today because it is ultimately the story of writing my latest book, The Satisfaction Cafe. And to tell that story, I also have to share a little bit about my writing career and the business of being an author. So I wrote my first book called Family Trust in 2017. And at that point, I had never published anything or taken any kind of writing course, and rather embarrassingly had instead gotten 2 business degrees, which I was using to work in the tech industry, often on products that were incomprehensible to me. I had had my first child and was, I think, now in the throes of pretty bad postpartum depression, and I really couldn't shake it. And I decided the best way to try and escape from my problems was to try and go to grad school. Again, because I had already gone for business school. So I got all these applications, but then when I got to the part where you have to get a recommendation letter, I hit a wall because I didn't know any writers. Like I realized I knew like 50 McKinsey consultants, but 0 authors. So I gave up on that and instead tried to write a manuscript. I wrote one and went out to try to get an agent. I got 0 agent interest, which makes sense because in retrospect, it was not a very good book. So on December 31st of that year, I decided to scrap that manuscript and start over. So on January 1st, I started a new project. And by the middle of that year, I had a new manuscript. And with that manuscript, I did manage to find an agent through the slush pile. And then that agent took it on submission to publishers. I was very nervous about my chances of getting a deal because I didn't have like a writing education or experience, so I had no bio, and I was, totally unknown. But then my agent told me, "Don't worry, this is your debut, and debuts are actually one of my favorite types of books to sell." Okay. So, what does that mean? Well, your first book, or rather your first novel, is typically called your debut. And what I learned is that the writing industry is unique in that, in contrast with other industries where what you earn generally rises over time as you have more experience and seniority, the majority of the time, although I do have to caveat here because this is probably not the case of many successful authors here, but a lot of the time your debut is actually going to be the largest deal you'll ever receive as an author. You have no sales track or no sales history, which publishers actually prefer. Because they love to discover the next big thing, and essentially you are just all potential at that point. So with all that in mind, when my agent took out my debut to publishers, multiple houses didn't end up being interested, and we went to auction. We ended up signing with HarperCollins, and it received a brief mention that year in the New York Times as one of the larger debut deals of the year. Mine was actually a 2-book deal, which meant that Harper agreed to pay me a certain amount for each of 2 books that I would write for them. Those 2 books were Family Trust, which came out in 2018, and then Imposter Syndrome, which came out in 2021. Okay, so that's the happy part of my story, and now we'll move on to the next part. So the next part of my story is the part which I'm not ever supposed to say out loud, even though I would say it is what happens to many of such larger debut book deals, and that is that my 2 books did not sell to expectations. You're not supposed to say that, I think, because many people associate it with failure, which of course it is in a way, and I want to say that it's just Americans, but actually I think it's everyone around the world, including myself, who is allergic to failure. It's kind of like saying that you didn't get into your dream school, or you didn't get the job you really wanted, or someone that you liked didn't like you back. And just like how in other industries you can kind of dress up your title on LinkedIn a little bit, you can kind of do that in the book world too. And in certain measures, my books still did, well. They got some good press. They were like a Costco pick or a book of the month, etc. But frankly, there were, very high expectations set because of the size of my deal, and it didn't meet them. And I just want to be honest here because that is part of my story and one that many people in the industry understandably don't talk about. So, after my 2 books were published, I was no longer under contract with Harper, but I still wanted to keep writing. So I spoke to my agent about my career, and I was like, what am I going to do? Am I ever going to be published again? Do I need to write Harry Potter fan fiction or, erotic dramas or vampires? And my agent very emphatically said, I should not do vampire erotica. And not because it's a bad genre, because believe me, if she thought I would do a good job at it, she would be like 100% go, because there's nothing that agents love more than making big deals, right, and a lot of money. But she knows that I would be terrible at it, and thus humiliate myself and thus her in the process. Instead, my agent said that I had to write something that I felt really connected to, because that's really the only way to write a book. But then she added, and this was ominous because my agent is not the type to mince words. She said, it better be really good. She said, in fact, had to be better than my first 2 books because I was starting at kind of like a relative disadvantage, right? I had a sales track, and it was not up to expectations. So then I thought about what I wanted to do. I think at the same time, I was kind of going through like a personal meltdown. It's like a slow rolling meltdown, which now I feel like it's just middle age because I'm still going through it right now. Which is just essentially like, what am I going to do with my life? Like, am I happy? Is this it? It's like all those very cliche questions that come rolling on you, like either in the middle of the night or like in the middle of the day at Target. And I thought about if I should quit my job because, I do have a day job in tech. And, after a while, I decided I need to keep it also just to remove any pressure of feeling like I need to produce something that, that's sold for my living, and just go back to, what made me want to be a writer in the first place. Okay, so why did I want to write a book? I think most authors get into writing because at the heart of it, we love reading. We love books. But then somewhere along the way, sometimes those ambitions can get mixed up. Like you decide you need to make an actual living, or you want to be famous, so your books need to be more commercially appealing, or you have a dream of getting a big movie deal, and so you think about what would be good on screen or what would be catchy there, or you analyze what's trendy in the market, and you're like, I could do a version of that, maybe. And what I realized was that what I wanted to do was write a book that I myself would read. I wanted to take all of my confusion about how to find meaning in life and feelings about how much we as humans all do want to connect to each other, but yet so often don't. How much waste there is sometimes in the world because there is so much opportunity to connect if we would just allow ourselves a little bit or not follow certain societal rules or open ourselves up to being a little bit embarrassed, maybe. I wanted to write a book about all of that and connection and love. And so I wrote it. I worked on it for about 18 months, and I sent it to my agent, and then she messaged me when she had read it and said, okay, let's set up a call. And we set the date, and I look forward to the call all week, because anyone that's a writer knows, or at least it's always a treat to get to talk to your agent, and you're kind of eager for their attention. So we hop on, and she says, hey, I think this is a good book, and I feel really very relieved. But then she says, hey, I'm wondering if we go out on submission for this one under a pseudonym. And it takes a second for this to land, and I say, okay, why a pseudonym? Why a fake name? And she explains it in a way that's kind of like telling someone who's like online dating for the first time that it would be best not to show your face on your profile, maybe? Just let the other party get to know your personality first, and then you can unveil it. You can unveil it then. So, okay. So I absorb it for a little bit, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. But what if the book still doesn't sell? And my agent basically says, yeah, that's going to be a big problem for you, because at that point, we've pretty much tried everything. So we do it anyway. And almost immediately, the pseudonym thing doesn't even work because neither of us understand metadata. And one of the editors it goes to does. And then they immediately figure out that it came from Kathy Wang's Word account. And so at this point, there's already a good amount of editor interest. But once that gets out, actually a few of them drop out, which hurts my feelings a little bit, but what are you going to do? But at the end, it still goes to auction. It was a smaller one than my first, but it finds a home with an imprint that I'm really happy to be with, which is Scribner, and now we are here. I was lucky in the end, but I am so aware that there are so many ways it may not have turned out how it did. In that, in general, some of the time when things turn out okay, some of the times it could be merit, but every single time you've got to have luck. And so because of that, I'm so grateful to be with each of you here in this room. Thank you so much for coming here and connecting with me on behalf of this wonderful organization. Thank you for being a part of something which has meant so much to me, and I hope you enjoy the novel. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Whoops. Okay, it's been a good morning, right? So, the novel spans 50 years in the life of Joan. At the end of the book, she's still Joan, the 25-year-old woman who stabbed her wayward husband, but he lived. But she is richly nuanced and changed by her life circumstances. What challenges did writing a book about such a long period of time present to you?
I don't know if it was a challenge. Like, I always wanted to write a book. When I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of books. Like, my parents would once a year be like, we got to get an English book. They would go to Price Club at the time, and they would bring home usually a book by like John Updike or Ann Tyler. And so I grew up reading those, and those often spanned an entire life. And because that's all we had in the house, I would read them over and over. And so that's just how I learned how books were written, I think, in the beginning. And so for this one, it was more just, I felt like I was trying to return to a form that I was more familiar with, which is, because when I write a character, I always want to know, like, how do they grow up? What happens to them later? Like, you build that out in your head anyways. And so here I was just like, I'm just going to put it all down on paper.
Did it feel to you as you were writing like, okay, Joan is aging?
No, it's like I feel like she exists both as a 20-year-old and a 40-year-old and a 70-year-old all at once, just like how I think we exist like that ourselves. We exist as all our different ages at once. Yeah.
Thank you. So Joan feels like an outsider in the white Palo Alto community, while she's also navigating between different generations' values and experiences. What prompted you to make this a theme in the novel, being other?
Being other? It's funny, I don't know if I approached it necessarily as being othered. I really wanted to approach it the way that someone in my mom's generation might have viewed it, because it's kind of set around the same time frame. And I mean, to be honest, I don't know if my mom was ever like, I'm being othered right now, like I think they're just like, this is life. And so I think I wanted to approach it just as in a very matter-of-fact way. I don't think she ever really dwells on her experience as maybe being part of of being othered. It's just, this is how I'm being treated. And I think we all have such individual experiences based on things about us that are different, so.
Is part of your mom's life in the book?
Absolutely not. She would be furious, so absolutely not.
How did she feel when she read it?
My mom and I have a very good relationship, so we see each other all the time, but she doesn't read my books.
Oh, okay.
So.
I read it.
I know, other people's moms do.
The age discrepancy between Joan and her husband is significant.
Yeah.
Was this an interest of yours before you wrote their characters, or did it arise organically? Like, did Bill and Joan speak to you?
I know, the age gap relationship. I think I'm just always interested in it. I just think it's just, I don't think about it a lot. Although I was very interested in the whole Bill Belichick thing that's provided a lot of interest for me. But I just, I think because when they get married, like she's 25, he's 51. And I think a 51-year-old man still thinks of himself as, he's like, I'm at the prime. But then, you grow older and she's still 40. Right? And so then you kind of see that, and I think it is interesting where the nexus of each gender, where they think the nexus of their power lies in age.
So from listening to you, it sounds like do you have a structure before you start your writing, or does it just evolve?
I think some people call it like you can be a pantser or a plotter. So pantser is you write by the seat of your pants, and then plotter is that you plot along. I actually think that's from George Martin, maybe. But I am a pantser.
Yeah.
So I don't plot. I just pants it.
That's a great word. So Various sibling relationships are intertwined in the novel. Step-siblings, Joan's biological son, and adopted daughter. What informed your thinking on this subject?
I am an only child, and so I am fascinated by siblings. When I was growing up, and all my friends, like even now, my friends are like, "Oh, we'll have coffee," and I'm like, "And how is your sister?" And like, and I want to know everything about it, and how they feel about it. I just think it's fascinating, and I now have 2 kids, and so I get to observe their sibling relationship, and I think it's a very unique relationship that I because I didn't have it myself, I just am naturally very drawn to it and observing it. It's
Did you have
amazing.
cousins?
I had cousins, yeah. It's not the same though, right? I mean, maybe the same.
But it's special. If a Satisfaction Cafe opened in Palo Alto or Los Altos, would you go there? Whom do you think would be the regulars? And what would you order?
I would absolutely go there. Who would be the regulars? I hope everybody, because it needs to be successful. And what would I order? So in the book itself, Joan, she just puts whatever she likes on the menu. So she has like beef noodle soup and croissants and smoothies and like a yogurt. And I think that's what hopefully it would have a very broad menu. And I'd probably order everything.
Do you hang out at cafes and coffee shops to write?
No, I aspire to do that. So, I would love to. Yeah, so whenever I do get to do it, I'm like, yeah, here I am. I don't get to do it very often.
So, on another subject, you went to Harvard Business School. Do you think your experiences and knowledge from there influence your stories, and if so, how?
I'm always like, I don't know if it was a mistake to go to business school or not. It must have, because I do think that there's like a stereotype of the people who go to business school, which is like probably absolutely true. But I mean, you get to meet so many different people, and you do get an understanding and an appreciation for, general, like the movement of economics, which is underpinning everything, so it does inform it probably in some background way, but I've never been able to really put it overtly. Well, I guess I did it in my first novel. I had an HBS person in it, so.
And I think I read this, but I don't remember the answer. So are you working in business?
I work in tech, so I work in the autonomous vehicle industry.
Okay. Emily probably said that, and I wasn't listening. Finally, for a young woman, maybe not finally, you have a lot of insight and thoughts on death and aging. So how did you develop such a mature perspective to write about it?
I appreciate that because I don't ever know if I'm writing, correctly or not. One of the inspirations for this book, and again, it's not based on my mom's life at all, but she lives, like if you ever see her house is very austere. It's very neat. She's like very controlled and clean. But one day I go over to her house and I see it's like inside the front door, on her garage, and then on her fridge, there's this giant pink "Do Not Resuscitate" sign, paperwork. And I was like, what? Like, you don't even have magnets. And she was like, I want to make sure that if I call the firemen and they have to come get me, that they know, like, do not resuscitate. And I was like, what kind of person would do this? Like, and so I was like, okay, and that's kind of one of the seeds of the book, was I was like, what kind of person thinks like this? And in that, I think probably, hopefully got some insight into it. And I'm aging myself every day. I feel it, and I think about it all the time. So,
So, I assume you're not going to write vampire erotica for your next story.
Never say never. Never say never.
Do you have an idea for your next book under a pseudonym?
I would hopefully not need to. No, because I think it's hard right now because the world is so difficult, and like the things that interest me, I don't know, sometimes you feel like there's a moment and not. Like I was like, this is what's going on in the news. And then you go back and you're like, well, I want to write about marriage and like, my domestic thoughts. And sometimes it just doesn't feel right, and sometimes it does. And then you can get the book down, but sometimes it doesn't. And right now it's in this weird spot where it doesn't feel, I don't know, I'm having a lot of problems. So if you have any ideas, let me know.
So your final question is, any predictions for who's going to win Best Picture tomorrow night? Or Best Actress, Best Actor, anything you like.
Sinners.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.